what today is about is discussing an issue that is rampant throughout America. It is a very serious issue, obviously, in this community, and it is an issue that we simply, as a nation, in Congress, in the media, do not talk about, and that is the issue of poverty and the toll that poverty is taking on the people of our country. Now, poverty is something that is bad no matter where it is in the world. But what is strange about what goes on in America is that we are the wealthiest country in the history of the world. So when you have desperate poverty, whether it's McDowell County or whether it's any place else in this country, whether it's inner cities all over this country, when you have unemployment rates that are very, very high, when you have opiate addiction or heroin addiction rates that are very, very high, when you have large numbers of people who are incarcerated, when you have people who cannot access decent quality health care or mental health treatment, when you have communities that don't even have grocery stores in America or access to bank branches, when you have kids who have no hope and have no opportunity, and when all of this takes place in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, something is fundamentally wrong. Just the United Nations report came out recently, documenting how poorly we do with regard to our children. In America, we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth. About 22% of our kids nationally live in poverty, but obviously in low-income communities, the number is much higher than that. We have families all over this country who have bright kids who have the capability of getting a higher education, but they simply don't have the funds to do that. So what we want to do today is two things, I think, basically. It's an informal hearing, informal discussion. One, we want to talk about the problems so that I and the American people can understand what's going on. And number two, equally important, we want to talk about solutions. And the solutions are going to come, yes, from Washington, yes, from state government, yes, from the local communities. But you guys who live here know the issues better than anybody else. So I very much want to hear your ideas. And we're very lucky this morning to have a great panel. And I want to begin, before we get to the panel, in thanking Linda and Joel McKinney for running this food bank and also for allowing us to use their facility. We thank them very much. I met Sabrina Schrader, what was it, a couple of years ago, Sabrina? Three? When Sabrina was kind enough to come to Washington, we held a hearing which was called, and I want to get into this issue today, it was called Poverty as a Death Sentence. You remember that? And what it was about, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later. You know, when people say poverty, they say, well, you know, it's too bad. If you're poor, you can't buy a big flat screen TV. You can't go out to a fancy restaurant. Too bad you're poor. But everybody here knows that's not really what poverty is about. What poverty is about is dealing with the stress of whether or not your family is going to make it every single week. And I don't know if Sabrina remembers, but I remember there was a doctor there, really very good doctor. And he talked about the physiology of poverty. People know what I mean by that? Physiology of poverty is the stress that your body deals with every day. When you worry about whether the lights stay on or whether you have enough money to put gas in the car to get to work. And if you can't put gas in the car to get to work, you lose your job. And what happens when you lose your job to the rest of your life? People on the edge every single day. Now, people who have money don't understand what that is about. But when you don't have any money, you're fighting for survival every day, and that takes a huge toll on your health. And that is why people in this county are living years less than in other parts of America, because that stress and the pounding away daily, day after day after day of poverty. Now, I come from a rural state as well, state of Vermont. And the issues that I'm seeing here are not radically different than exist in my state or other states in this country. So what today is about is talking about what is going on, talking about how we go forward from here, and always remembering that this is not a poor country, that this country is the wealthiest country in the history of the world, that we have one family that's worth $149 billion. More wealth than the bottom 40% of the American people, that the top 1/10 of 1% now own almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. So that's the context I think we should be thinking about. Okay, let's begin. Sabrina, I think many of you know Sabrina Schrader. And we thank Sabrina for being here, for helping us to organize the event, and for coming to Washington a few years ago. Sabrina, take it away. Stand, sit. There you go.
Well, I just want to say you all make me very proud. I'm really glad to be here. So, like you said, I'm Sabrina Schrader. I grew up in Twin Branch Holler. All of my family and I were born into generational poverty, like many of you. I know what it's like to not have enough food, and what it's like to stand in line at a food bank, not have enough money to pay your electric bill, what it's like to get unemployment, what it's like to not have health insurance, what it's like to walk miles in the snow because your car is broken down, what it's like to be the only one in my family who graduated from high school and the only one to get a bachelor's degree. It's not something that I've ever felt proud of. While many children are born into poverty every day, poverty is not a child's fault, and it is not a family's fault. No one who was born into poverty asks for a life filled with struggling for everything that you need to live with every day. But nowadays, we seem more interested in taking things away from these families instead of giving them a fair shot. I wish it all had been easier, but unfortunately for now, my life continues to be a struggle. Even though programs and people helped me to get this far, I still have more than $30,000 in college loans and thousands in medical bills. I still don't make enough to pay back my college loans, and it's been 8 years since I've earned my bachelor's degree. I'm still constantly working on solving years of problems that were created beyond my control. Some reasons for the continuation of poverty here are there are no colleges in McDowell County, and there is not a road to connect us with everywhere else. Improving and building new roads like the King Cole Highway will give us access to resources, hospitals, colleges, and each other while creating jobs. Currently, people need immediate medical attention, and they end up dying on the way to the hospital or in a helicopter. And living in poverty every day creates toxic stress. That's the physiology that Senator Sanders was talking about, the physiological problems. Causes more problems like mental illness, addiction, and preventable health issues. We need more health care providers and addiction treatment centers to combat these issues in every county of West Virginia. Some people say poverty is a death sentence, and I have seen many die before their time. I've had several family members, friends, and classmates all die young. Car accidents are common, cancer, and serious medical complications. I was in a horrible car accident when I was in 11th grade, and that wreck left me severely injured, and I had to learn how to walk and talk again. When I was in college, I got meningitis and was given a death sentence once again. Thankfully, I recovered, and I was able to go back to school. For far too long, political and governmental systems have caused and prolonged oppression, and it is time for that to stop. And instead, We need to create prosperity here. We must invest in each other and in ways that will help us thrive instead of dying trying to survive. Poverty is a problem that can be solved, yet it continues, and it's giving our family and friends an early death sentence. My experience of going to Washington, D.C. to share my story led me to realize that I, and all of you, can be political leaders too. Now I'm running for a House of Delegates seat. We can solve problems if we work together in a compassionate way. I'm doing everything within my power to change what's happening in southern West Virginia. I continue to do nonprofit type work, travel around the state and surrounding states, go to conferences, workshops, meetings, learning how to apply for grants and network with other people. I do everything that my husband's income and my physical energy allows. God has blessed me to make it through obstacles, many obstacles, and every day I am stronger, but I need help. We all do. I'm really pleased that this event has been organized today by Senator Bernie Sanders so that we can come together for a community conversation about rural poverty. Now I would like to welcome and introduce Bernie Sanders.
All right, before I chat again, I wanted you to meet probably somebody that many of you know. Clearly, in rural America, we need to do the best that we can to educate our young people. And I want to thank Tanya Spinella, who is a teacher in the Welch Elementary School. Tanya, thanks very much for being here.
Thank you. Senator Sanders, guests, and residents of our beloved county. First of all, I want to stop and say I am very hoarse, so bear with me. And thank you for the opportunity to address you here today. My name is Tanya Spinella, and I have lived and taught in McDowell County for the past 4 years, and it has been the most rewarding time of my life. I grew up not far from here in Mercer County in a little town called Elgood. My husband and I chose to come to McDowell County, the place where he grew up, after we finished our degrees at Concord University. In truth, we came back because we were both teachers and we knew we wouldn't have a really hard time finding work. I continue to work here, however, because I genuinely fell in love with the people of this great county. The students I've had the pleasure of working with here are, in my very biased opinion, the best students in the whole country. But I'm sure every teacher would say that about her students. But they have an intellect, a drive, and a thirst for knowledge, as many young burgeoning minds across the nation do. Our students, however, have something else. In many cases, they are born into crippling poverty, broken or untraditional family structures, or worse yet, born into families with severe and debilitating drug addictions. But our students have dreams that aren't encumbered by their socioeconomic status. They have dreams of becoming paleontologists and teachers and artists and engineers. Senator Sanders, our students can dream just as big as any in this nation, and thanks to your ideals, students will have the hope of pursuing their dreams through affordable higher education. I was told my first class of students at Welch Elementary School, where I still teach, were the most challenging group of kids in the school. My mentors had told me that I would never forget my first class of kids because they were the class that would either make you or break you as a teacher. So naturally, I was terrified. But I soon learned that these students weren't bad kids. They struggled because their homes lacked support and structure. Recently, McDowell County Schools began a home visiting initiative for kindergarten through 3rd. Amanda Frigiel, the Title I director at McDowell County Schools, began this project in hopes of giving our teachers an inside look at what our students go through every single day at home. But what the teachers received was so much more. And going into these homes, we realized that the kids might not be able to concentrate in class because they were worried about their sick grandmother at home that couldn't afford medical care, or they were hungry, or an absentee parent had just appeared into their lives again for the first time in years. Or perhaps they were worried about their homes, that in their only source of heat was a single kerosene heater. How can we expect our students to remember their homework or to bring a pencil to class if they've been crying up all night because they have a cavity they can't treat? How can we expect them to learn multiplication when all they can think about is the ever-present threat of eviction after a parent loses a job? How can we expect them to succeed in life when all they've ever been told is that they cannot succeed because they are from McDowell County? My students come to school with a myriad of problems. A student can't be expected to learn if we require them to ignore their life outside of school. This is why my school and many others have moved toward community school projects that include free mental health services for families. Our SMILES program is working to ensure every student in our county can see a dentist. Our various after-school programs attempt to fight hunger by providing students with a third daily meal throughout the week and blessings in a backpack, which gives non-perishable foods for over the weekend. These are real problems with real families in our county. This means they require real answers. We can no longer rely on empty promises and outdated solutions. We are working on making a better tomorrow for McDowell County, and we believe that begins with you. Thank you.
Tanya, thanks very much. Now I'd like to introduce Sam Pensunk. Do I pronounce that right? Okay, who is a local attorney who's been involved on workers' rights issues and anti-poverty efforts. Sam.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. I'm also a native West Virginian and first came to work and visit in McDowell County back in 2004, so it's getting to be a little while, but have worked around southern West Virginia. I still have came to work over in Mullins, just over the mountain here, as a through one of the great anti-poverty programs that we have in this country, the Avista program, and worked long about 10 years ago now over there. I've worked on workers' rights, anti-poverty, economic diversification, and empowerment initiatives throughout southern West Virginia now, as well as working in various policy-making capacities for West Virginians. And I, as a labor lawyer, my job is to fight for and along with the rights of workers, and that's often coal miners who are fighting for better health and safety conditions at work for their black lung benefits. I do a lot of work representing miners who are struggling to get black lung benefits, and we have excellent resources in part thanks to the federal black lung programs that provide health clinics in Tug Fork just down the road here in McDowell County, but those clinics they have a big battle, and so we work with them, and they receive important support from the state and federal levels. So I work to fight for fair pay for workers, and also to take non-traditional approaches to increasing assets and wages and wealth for working people by forming cooperatives that are actually owned by workers. And we have a long experience of that in West Virginia, worker-owned businesses. When the Weirton steel industry was collapsing back in the 80s, many people may recall West Virginia workers got together and created the largest worker-owned company in the nation. To take control of that steel mill and keep it open for a long time. And it was a struggle, and they were fighting global trade, but they did it. And that was what we do in West Virginia, is we get together and we win battles like that. And so that's my work. I was asked to speak a little bit about what I see as the systemic sources of poverty. And, I work as a labor lawyer and as a systems thinker. And so this is all very familiar to West Virginians. So for the benefit of those who may not be from here, we have long-term challenges that are structural challenges in our economy, structural forces keeping poverty in place. We've had population loss. McDowell County knows better than many, but all throughout the southern coal fields, we've lost a lot of population as our industries have contracted. It's known and it's reported from during the 80s. This county led among all the coal-producing counties of Central Appalachia. McDowell County lost 42% of its population, more than any other of the coal-producing counties back in the 80s. And that's been a long-term challenge. Population loss. Second long-term challenge we have had in West Virginia is is underutilization of our land. A lot of our land is owned by big corporations that don't make best use of that land all the time. They let it set fallow, and people know that. It's just a difficult situation to do something about. But, in the county where I work a lot, just over the hill here, Wyoming County, and it's similar here in McDowell, when you take surface and mineral rights together, the county is almost entirely owned, almost completely owned by resource extraction companies. And that makes it hard to push for innovative land use that helps working people, that helps local people. Thirdly, we've had long-term challenge of private and public debt. West Virginia was created with a 50-year obligation to pay off the infrastructure debt of Virginia back in the 1800s. We didn't pay that debt off until the New Deal, and our government's been struggling to keep up ever since. Our workers' compensation system, which deals with has dealt for a long time with the back pain and the other pain and injuries that our workers have suffered. Our workers' compensation system was insolvent in our legislature, and we have excellent legislators, and I see that there are several of them here today. And they fought very hard to try to make up for our public inability to pay for these costly injuries that people have faced on the job. But that's been a structural challenge for our state. So we've struggled with population loss. We struggle with access to land. We struggle with debt at the household level too, as well as the public level. And we've struggled with the decline and the depletion of our resources. And there's a lot of talk about that. But for 20 years, we've understood that a lot of the coal that we have in central Appalachia would be mined out and basically gone by right about this time. The U.S. Bureau of Mines reported back in the early 1990s that after detailed surveys of the geological reserves and estimates about economic productivity over the coming decades, the forecast at that time, back in the 90s, was that our coal reserves would bottom out right about 2015 in counties like Boone and Pike County, Kentucky, and others around our southern West Virginia counties. Very carefully studied, and lo and behold, that's happening now, and it's a big challenge. So to be effective at eliminating poverty and building wealth for working families, we've got to accomplish the broader structural change that I think we're talking about here today. I think that Senator Sanders is talking about broader structural change to address these difficult structural problems that keep poverty in place. I hope that we can hear from the audience. This is a wealth of knowledge in this room. I know many people have taught me most everything I know about the world. I've learned from many of you and from coal miners and other folks and leaders, community leaders around Wyoming, McDowell. And so I hope we can hear from you about how we can take advantage as communities of these structural reforms that Senator Sanders is talking about to eat away at the root causes of poverty. I'll just name four areas. First, Senator Sanders has brought attention. A lot of people in this room are engaged into growing our regional food systems. That improves our access to land, improves the utilization of land. It's one of our structural challenges. The USDA has a role to play. The Appalachian Regional Commission has a very important role to play in improving access to land in our areas, and a lot of us are partnering with them. Secondly, as to food systems, a particular challenge that we need to lift up in West Virginia. It's not a challenge necessarily right here in McDowell and Wyoming now, but we have a lot of poultry farmers in our state who struggle with unfair, unjust, and unreasonable pricing practices. And there's talk to grow the poultry industry and grow in the agriculture industry. We need to be mindful. The Grain Inspection, Packers, and Stockyards Administration at the federal level prosecutes unfair pricing practices. If we're going to grow the ag industry in West Virginia, it needs to be beneficial for working people, not dirt poor poultry farmers. That's not what we need to create. So first, your campaign is lifting up growth of regional food systems. That's critical. Secondly, building wealth for workers is not just about creating jobs that can be horribly low wage-paying jobs, low benefits. You've spoken about, and a lot of folks here are beginning to work on the issue I mentioned earlier of non-traditional business structures, worker ownership, cooperative ownership. We have a federal rural utilities service at the USDA that is supposed to help create rural utilities, cooperatively and community-owned utilities to better serve our needs without driving our electric bills way through the roof. And that's something I know in my practice as a public interest lawyer, we deal all the time with people who can't pay their utility bills, and state and federal government can partner better on those issues. I would say additionally, democratizing or improving access to capital by growing the nonprofit lending sector and community credit unions, taking back power from From the banks and the bigger lending institutions that don't serve our communities well, the Federal Community Development Financial Institutions Fund has an important role to play in that. So those are some areas where I think we can look for reform.
Great.
Thank
Sam,
you.
thank you very much. What I want to do now, I think at the end of the day, the solutions to the problems that we face are going to come from the federal government, from the state government, the local government, from the private sector, from people in this room. Let me just say a few words about what I see as the federal government's role. And I'm going to open it up to you. You'll do anything you want, make comments, ask questions, and the panel will get involved as well. Number one, real unemployment in this country is not what you read in the papers at 5%. It's really actually double that when you look at people who have given up looking for work and people working part-time. And obviously in communities like this, the unemployment rate is a lot higher than that. So what do we need to do? As a country, we need to create millions of decent-paying jobs, right? A lot of ways that you could do it. Sam talked about some of them. But one obvious way that the economists think is the fastest way to do it is in your state and in my state, as it happens, we got thousands of bridges that are in need of repair. We got roads. You know, in Vermont, sometimes people go down a pothole, we don't see them again for weeks. You know, probably not only Vermont, okay? I was in Flint, Michigan a couple of months ago. You'll know what goes on in Flint, Michigan. Kids are getting poisoned by the water they drink. Well, it's not just Flint, Michigan. We got hundreds of communities where the water systems are inadequate and people are worried about the water they're drinking. We need to improve our water systems, our wastewater plants. We used to have the best rail system in the entire world. Guess what? That is no longer the case. Our airports are in many cases outdated. Parts of this country, our levees and our dams. If we put $1 trillion into rebuilding our infrastructure, we can create 13 million good-paying jobs and a hell of a lot of jobs right here in West Virginia where those jobs are most needed. And when you rebuild our infrastructure, we make our country safer, more productive, more efficient. All right, that's number one, creating jobs. Number two, we got millions and millions of people in this country who are working for wages that are absolutely inadequate. So you work 40 or 50 hours a week, and in some cases you're going to be worse off than when you began the week. All right, so let's be clear. The federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour is a starvation wage. All right, people can't live on it. I believe we got to raise the minimum wage to a living wage so that if you work 40 hours a week, you know what? You're living with a modicum of security and dignity. What does that mean? About $15 an hour. 3, we got a problem in this country that has gone on for a long time based on old-fashioned sexism, in that women today make about 79 cents on the dollar compared to men. Well, I think we got to end that. We need pay equity for women. They deserve 100 cents on the dollar compared to men. 4, number 4, we have had in this country for many, many years disastrous trade policies which were written by corporate America and were designed to enable large corporations to shut down in this country, not pay workers here a living wage, and then move to Mexico and China and other low-wage countries. Pay people pennies an hour. We have got in your state, here in West Virginia, my understanding is that as a result of NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement with Mexico, you have lost about 30,000 jobs since the creation of NAFTA, good-paying manufacturing jobs. We have got to end those disastrous trade policies and tell corporate America that if they want us to buy their products, they damn well better manufacture those products in West Virginia and in Vermont and in America. In those communities like McDowell County and many others who are transitioning away from coal. These communities need help. It is not the coal miners' fault in terms of what's happening in this world. And we've got legislation that would put $41 billion into helping